Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked, going through the week's sports news and with an extra guest this week.
The man who invented VAR, you could perhaps say, Paul Hawkins, the founder of Hawkeye, who's been involved in numerous sports.
Joining me, Rob Harris from Sky News, Martyn Ziegler from The Times, and Tariq Panja from the New York Times. No unexpected callers, though, on this pod. Unlike at the IOC, Thomas Bach.
Yes. Oh, very good, Rob. We mentioned this last week. Thomas Bach got a prank call from a couple of Russian guys who feigned being an official from the African Union. The IOC got ahead of it in a way by saying it happened. Now we know what was said. It's not hugely embarrassing in terms of content. The fact it happened is massively. So what did Thomas Bach say?
Asked about stuff about the Russia's friendship games, and the suggestion being that the callers, who was meant to be from an African nation, were saying that they wanted to take part, and what would happen about that. So asking things about Russians' involvement in the Olympics. What Thomas Bach actually replied was fairly straightforward, but interestingly, the Russian foreign ministry sort of picked up on this, which does make you wonder whether this was sort of a state-sponsored hoax, and saying that Bach had made a politically, administrative and criminal plot with a certain party to exclude strong sports competitors from international competitions, basically suggesting that they're conniving with the Ukraine to keep the Russians out of the Olympics.
They're going to seize on anything, aren't they? Russia, to try to pick holes in this ban on them from Paris, and this will just aid them. But how easy is it to get through to Thomas Bach? Do you reckon they've been trying this on Alexander Sheffrin at UEFA, Gianni Infantino at FIFA as well, these hoax callers?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I'm not sure it's the first time that's happened as well. And it wasn't just Thomas Bach, by the way. They got through to Witold Banka, the president of the World Anti-Doping Agency, an organization that, of course, has a lot of history with Russia and state-sponsored events. And it was the same person, essentially, this official said to be from the African Union. The other takeaway for me here is this idea that sports and politics shouldn't mess. FIFA, for example, has this rule that could sanction countries if their politicians get involved. But in this call, Bach actually asked the African Union officials, can you step in to stop your athletes, to stop your teams from competing in these friendship games or anything like that? So you can see how sports officials use political officials when it's expedient.
Don't mention politicians getting involved in the Olympics. We've had enough of that in Britain this week, grumbling about a design of a flag. I can't believe we're getting back into this again. It just seems the most ridiculous thing, but to cut through the noise seems worthwhile bringing up at least.
For various sort of culture wars reasons, suddenly burst onto the front pages of some papers, saying because the design of the Union Jack has been in some way changed to add different colours in. But interestingly, I was just looking back because a few Conservative Party politicians have got involved. Esther McVeigh was tweeting about it, leave the Union Jack alone. But at the 2016 Conservative Party conference, the Conservative Party changed the Union Jack got rid of all the red from it. So it was just blue and white. Is that a bit of hypocrisy, anybody?
These things will travel more because it is Britain, isn't it? That's why we end up talking about it on here.
Well, we're talking about it on here because why? Again, it's this issue that
because it's so ridiculous.
National newspaper, and it is ridiculous. And you know what? Most people don't give a damn. So this shirt has been on sale for some number of months.
Without getting too much into the world of design, the thing is, a lot of flags are just 3 stripes. So if you tweak the colours, it could end up looking like another country. The UK has a unique design, which means it's a gift almost to designers to be able to tweak it, give blended designs on it, patterns, and manipulate it. We hear so much when companies rebrand, they talk about a dynamic logo that can be used in versatile ways with different colours. The UK perhaps has one of the best brand elements to be able to do that with the flag.
It sounds like an alternative career there for Rob. Any interest in Savile Row, Rob?
That's a topic for
there you go. You can bring flamboyance back.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. The variety we cover on here. Let's start, though, But the serious stuff in Turkey, what a week it's been there. We've had Fenerbahce members all gathering in their stadium, not for a match, but to vote on whether to quit the league.
Yeah, incredible. And this is from a few weeks ago. People might have seen these pictures on social media, pitch battle between the players of Fenerbahce, and it seems some of the supporters of Trabzonspor, this team in Trabzon on the Black Sea. Players kicking and punching fans to try and get away from being attacked. And Fenerbahce obviously were fuming about this, angry with the Turkish FA's kind of slow response. They had a vote of the membership to essentially quit the league. And Fenerbahce, it's like the equivalent of Manchester United saying, we're going to leave the Premier League because of this. It's such a big deal, and the passions it around. Fenerbahce, in the end, the vote went in the way of staying. And then
this is proper sort of grassroots football. We'll just pack up and leave.
Yeah, it's just crazy. And then eventually there's been some repercussions for Trabzonspor. They've been given this 6-game ban from having fans in their stadium. But can you imagine that in any like serious competition, Premier League or Serie A? What? Just the idea of the pitch battles and then this vote, kind of insane. These two clubs have history. Fenerbahce's bus on the way to a game at Trabzonspor was shot at. A bullet went through the window. Luckily, no one was harmed, and this was a few years ago. I mean, it's quite incredible. We talked about Turkish football, didn't we, with Ebru a few months ago. Things don't seem like they're calming down, do they?
You certainly see the passion, though, to get all those fans in on a non-match day into the stadium.
Yeah, it's slightly disappointing that they decided to remain in the Turkish Super League, because what would have happened if they'd gone out? I mean, I think not surprisingly they decided to stay in. It was one of those slightly, should we take our bat and ball home moments that obviously was never going to happen.
Was there another league or country that was going to let them in?
Well, no. So here's what apparently they were going to fall into the second division or something later on. And the other reason why the members would certainly vote against it, they're neck and neck with Galatasaray for the title. So it's not like they're kind of meandering somewhere in the middle of the league. They're in the death throes of a title race here as well. So it would have been some move there.
Makes things seem pretty tame in the Premier League, doesn't it? It's all been about the financial announcements this week, hasn't it, by clubs? Why this week?
Club accounts have to be posted with Companies House by March the 31st. So there's been a lot of financial annual reports coming out this week. Not all of them have come up yet. We're still waiting for Chelsea's to go on Companies House, but most of the others have. Tottenham Hotspur, Everton, Leicester City, they've all got sort of various interesting things about them.
Headlines, Martyn?
Well, probably Daniel Levy getting paid £6.58 million, by far the highest paid club chief in the Premier League. That includes a £3 million accrued bonus. But even without that, he'd be the highest paid. So, yeah, big bucks for Mr. Levy.
But that was on the back of record revenue of £550 million. So fair salary or not, particularly, I suppose, when fans are protesting that at the older range of things, the senior citizens, the OAPs, have had their discounts cut.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Rob, it's interesting. We use fair salary, but it's very interesting. Football and football clubs are kind of different animals than other businesses, where you have sensitivity of the match going public, because they feel, maybe quite rightly, a sense of ownership to this. They help build it. They're part of the club. And as you said, I went to the game last week against Luton, and it was quite some sight to see these older gentlemen, the pensioners, protesting and picketing fans about this increase in ticket prices. So it sticks in the craw with those guys, as we've seen, as Daniel Levy, so been quite successful in getting that new stadium over the line, having such a big salary, and something to discuss for the club.
So we talked about that revenue of £550 million, but they lost £87 million. How are they losing so much? If you look at another club, Brighton, they made a record profit of £123 million.
Yeah, they've made, I think, losses, high losses for the last 4 years, Spurs. I mean, speaking to Kieran Maguire, he was saying basically 70 million of those losses are sort of infrastructure related, so the new stadium, other facilities. But he did say in the report, that the losses are because they're investing heavily in the squad. Obviously, that didn't include any income from Harry Kane's sale to Bayern Munich, so they've got a lot of cash in the bank from that for this season, because the financial results are for last season.
But the interesting thing for me from that report actually was Tottenham saying, in order to grow, and that stadium is £1 billion stadium, and if you haven't had a chance to visit it, I would recommend it. It's an incredible facility there. But in order to grow, to get to this kind of next level or whatever they were trying to do, they say they do require external capital investment, and talk about having Rothschild's, the investment bank, on board, trying to get some investors on board. So my question to you both is: are they trying to get a sale? We talked about Joe Lewis, who we all thought was the owner for a long time, until we were then told it's in a trust, and Joe Lewis was then indicted and has taken a guilty plea for insider dealing in the US. Is Tottenham Hotspur on the market? And do you think if we were to do this next year, will someone different own Tottenham?
Well, it was about a year and a bit ago, after in and around the Qatar World Cup, that Daniel Levy was in talks with Nasser Al-Khelaifi, the PSG president, Qatar Sports Investments, owners of Paris Saint-Germain. Tottenham at the time almost seemingly dismissed that was any prospect of selling a stake. But why go public in the annual report and announce you're looking for potential external investment? There's no obligation to, is there?
No.
I suppose there's no reason not to. Why not say you're open to investment? I mean, I think the impression I get is
against transparency.
The impression I get is that they are much more keen on selling a stake rather than the whole thing. But just to go to mentioning Brighton, I mean, they did have the highest ever profit ever achieved by an English football club, £123 million, basically. And it would have been the highest profit in the world if it hadn't been for Barcelona after they sort of used their economic levers. So this isn't, I mean, a lot of it is due to player sales, but even without player sales, they would still just be in the black. So, with other clubs losing money hand over fist, breaching Premier League financial rules, Brighton showed it can be run successfully.
And this is even without the profits from the sale of Cascado and Sanchez to Chelsea. That was, £125 million. So pretty impressive. But it's working now, isn't it, the model? They qualified for Europe, doing well in the Premier League. But is there a potential that things do go miss? It might seem a genius now, but if certain sales and signings don't work out, that they end up in a position like Southampton, of course, got relegated. Even Brentford struggling now, battling against relegation. Paul Barber's been given a new contract this week as CEO and vice chair until 2030. Now it's suddenly boardroom contracts getting the fanfare of player signings. But, Tariq, you went to Brighton, profiled them last year. Is this a long-term stable vision and strategy, or could a few bad signings take it off the path it's on?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't predict. Very hard to predict this player is going to make it, but they've got a bit of a long history now of doing this. And if you look at the current squad, the players that replace some of the players you've mentioned who've gone, and don't forget Yves Bissouma to Tottenham before that, you have this new cast of characters, a system of playing, a way of replacing every member of staff. One of the things that Paul Barber said is they have contingency plans for every senior member of staff as well, including himself. So it's not just which players replace who, which executives go. They are kind of future-proofing as far as you can, but there's no guarantees. It's a football team, but they have done really well. I mean, look at this year. Simon Adingra, for example, won the African Nations Cup with the Ivory Coast. He's come in there after with Mitoma, just after Mitoma, after Leandro Trossard, another expensive exit to Arsenal. So they do have this in play, and long may it continue for them. They've lost a lot of staff, by the way. that entire recruitment team. We've also seen Sam Jewell, who replaced the fellows who went to Chelsea, also going to Chelsea. So almost a completely new recruiting department there. So it'll be interesting what the long-term future looks like there with so much churn.
A lot of that churn to Chelsea, and we've actually been hearing from Todd Bowley this week.
Todd Bowley did an interview with Forbes magazine, a rare interview. I mean, I didn't think he sort of revealed that much. It's quite interesting that he was actually speaking out, but there's no sort of major headlines, that particularly from there, was there?
No, it wasn't that revealing at all. I mean, if I'm Todd Bowley, it's a bit of an advert for Todd Bowley, so you'd be happy with it. Essentially, this is a fellow who has made a lot of money in structured financing, and he's a genius in financial engineering. So says, people who like Todd Bowley. So, yeah.
Chelsea fans suddenly getting used to revolting again, having spent all those years lavishing praise on Roman Abramovich for all the spending, which obviously they benefited really well from as they won the titles, and the turbulence helped them as they had sort of that ever flow of investment into players and changing managers. But we hadn't been used to much protest either at Manchester City for many years under Sheikh Mansour, and suddenly they found their spirit of revolution again as well, haven't they, after so many years? A City fans banner, record profits but record prices, stop exploiting our loyalty. That appeared at the Etihad at the weekend. I thought they're completely infatuated with Sheikh Mansour. Where's this opposition all come from?
I mean, it's not just them. I mean, there does seem to be a bit of a sort of groundswell of fans protesting about ticket price increases generally, and a bit more sort of fan action. Lots of clubs now have fan. I think they have to have fan advisory boards in the Premier League. Not all of them have been set
Tariq,
up.
this is where you say society's just getting angry.
Yeah, people are angry, but in this case, I think the fans have a point. It's not just this. Chelsea, for example, our pal David Hellier, I noticed on Twitter this week, he pointed out that the big game, Chelsea versus Manchester United, there's a section of tickets that are being sold for £800, and this is not in a box, and they're not being sold. So David was saying there could be like empty seats at a game like Chelsea Manchester United because regular people are being priced out in return for £800 to £1,000 seats.
Here's the thing, though. We've got the profit and sustainability rules in the Premier League, which means that it limits how much investment that an owner can put into a club to cover losses. So Manchester City have to raise the finances from ticket sales and their own fans to comply with PSR, because it can't be that Sheikh Mansour just gives the tickets away, even if he wanted to, because of the apparent competitive balance rules.
Well, he's allegedly given a lot of sponsorship away as well. We're still waiting for the results of those 115 charges, some of those companies directly linked, of course, to Sheikh Mansour. So, it's a tricky situation for Manchester City as they try and balance their books with this in the background. Manchester City deny all the allegations against them, and we're still waiting for the end of that case.
I've got somebody's at the door. Hang on.
Sheikh Mansour's there. You reckon? Have we had a chance to watch the Manchester City documentary on Netflix
Rob,
this week? The reviews haven't really made me want to watch it.
I'd like to say I have, but no, that wouldn't be true. I watched a bit of football. This Man City documentary. Tell us about it. What's it all about?
Well, one of the issues is it's produced by Manchester City, and I know the All or Nothing series from Amazon do have a lot of club approval. Clearly nothing that they don't want to be seen, I imagine, is going to be seen. But this is City themselves filming it and producing it, which shows us in a way how clubs have become content makers themselves as well now.
Yeah, hugely. I think the content departments within these clubs have until now focused on short form, whether it's YouTube or these clips on TikTok and other social platforms. But as you've said, they've now made this documentary. Who is it for, though? Is it for their fans, or do you think someone like random would want to watch a club-made documentary about Manchester City or any other team if you're not a fan of those teams?
Pep's going to have his fans and so will the players. If you just want to watch something perhaps light, and the thing about that Manchester City treble, not to take away from it, great footballing achievements, of course, to be able to manage those players, of course, with City not having the dominance they once enjoyed in the Premier League this season, shows how challenging it is to sweep the 3 trophies. But it sort of lacked those signature big dramatic moments like the Manchester United treble had, the crescendos where you think something's really in doubt. So that might take away from the drama of the actual production itself. Saying that, I've not actually watched it. I should watch it. I will hold my hands up for that.
Yeah, the other thing you say, I think most people on Netflix probably aren't aware about, that it's a sort of internal production. They'll just think, it's a football thing. Might watch it, because I like watching football things.
Rob, you mentioned Pep Guardiola there. He was in the news again. And this was the ticking off he gave, or coaching, if you want. He gave Jack Grealish after a game against Arsenal, the big game against Arsenal last weekend. And he fired back because he was asked by a journalist, "What are you doing this in a performative manner on the field?" And he got quite touchy about that, didn't he?
It's good content, though. Good content for City's own documentary, potentially. I mean, ultimately sort of harmless in a way, but it creates the clip. And here's the thing about all this content City have clearly produced for this documentary, that perhaps there'd be an even better version in a few decades' time. Make sure you keep the uncut versions, less harm done, but it would help to give a real great insight perhaps into the club, the players, the manager, and let's get it on Netflix in, 20, 30 years' time.
If there will be a Netflix.
Ooh, wow, Martyn, what are you suggesting? Well, that's a bombshell.
Yeah. Well,
the way we're going to watch TV will be very different.
Yeah, we'll be.
Well, the way
we'll be immersed. You'll be immersed. You'll just be sitting in a sort of virtual reality, room with Pep Guardiola, sort of shouting at Jack Grealish right next to you.
The way we watch football is very different, of course, from 20 odd years ago now, and you might recognise the name of the guest we're about to introduce, Paul Hawkins, the inventor of Hawkeye technology.
Martyn, you've been talking to him at the Times. Is inviting him on Sport Unlocked now the review of those answers?
Yeah, it's going to be a lengthy delay before he comes on. Oh no, he's here right now. Paul, you actually came on to the Times Q&A that we did online about VAR. And interesting, you said the contribution to sport that you're least proud of, and that's quite something considering it's more than a dozen sport that Hawkeye work with. But not only are you saying that, but you've got some ideas to fix it. But yeah, so what sort of gave you the sort of impetus to raise these points?
I think the things I'm most proud of are things where our contribution to sport has meant that there are less column inches about the officiating of the sport, and there are more column inches about the sport itself and the players and the outcome of the match and all that side of things. So I think that's really the yardstick for the right introduction of technology to help officiating is a good official doesn't get noticed, and therefore if technology is there to assist officiating, if ultimately the officiating hasn't been part of the story and it hasn't been noticed, that's the yardstick. And the number of column inches is about VAR is, for me, the yardstick of where it could aim to be improved. So that's what I was getting at when I was saying I was least proud.
We might a bit of the negatives at times, but many might forget that one of your big early football inventions was goal line technology, and now it almost exists without mention. We just accept it. Brennan Johnson had a goal for Spurs disallowed. It looked like it had crossed the line. GLT immediately showed no goal, and it's just accepted, and we don't seem to have days of rows about that.
And that's a great example of the technologies that I am proud of. And technically, it's quite difficult, goal line technology. A lot of them are really easy, and then you get the odd one, which is quite difficult. So yes, a good, our GLT system, tennis, cricket, sports, which has become adopted, and now you just don't really hear of the column inches of bad umpiring decisions in those sports. It's basically completely gone compared to pre-Hawkeye. So for me, that's what I'm super proud of.
Paul, you keep mentioning column inches, but the world we live in today seems to be tweets and social media posts. Do you think, in a way, that's that the idea of this environment where people are just free to just spout whatever they want, be angry, is part of all of this as well. Because it didn't exist when when you had this idea, did it?
You obviously get immediate feedback of the fans much easier through social media now, and you can gauge people's perception of things that much quicker. Absolutely.
But there is a sense at times that the introduction of technology might have ruined sport, particularly football. While some might see you as the saviour, now with these lengthy VAR delays, bringing in the robots that just heralded these long, lengthy debates, discussions, things that were never meant to be microanalysed like offside.
I still think there is a bright future for VAR, and I really do hope we get to the point where its introduction into football gets to the point of where technology has assisted officiating as goal-line technology, and other sports have adopted it. And the things that I think will be the roadmap to get us there, in my mind, and obviously there are lots of people in FIFA and that have different views. And I'm speaking just as a fan, someone I'm not involved in the day-to-day of Hawkeye anymore. But for me, the things that would help get us there is firstly the personnel that do VAR. Clearly, there is an overlap between officiating the VAR side of things and being the referee on a pitch. But that's a relatively, in my mind, small part of the skill set of being a really good VAR official. Clearly, you need to know the rules, clearly the laws, clearly you need to have some appreciation of what it's like to be on the pitch. But some people who are good on the pitch aren't very good at processing information when seeing the replays on the screen. And we obviously do lots of VAR training. And almost within the first 5 minutes, you can just tell the type of people who are going to pick this up quickly and those that aren't. And equally, there are a lot of people who have spend their lives in broadcast trucks that look at replays every single day, that, with some training of learning the officiating side of things and at least refereeing to a certain standard, I think you've got an opportunity to improve the skill set of the personnel of VAR officials generally, just through really differentiating the job of a VAR from the job of a person that's at the elite level on the field.
Fascinating. And a lot of people on the Q&A suggested is this idea of having a challenge. Am I right in thinking that you originally envisaged VAR as something where teams could have just like one or two challenges for every goal?
So how VAR started, we had 2 years of doing it offline in the Dutch league. And the plan was the third year was going to be a online trial where different formats of using it were experimented with. Then circumstances overtook them and that never happened. But I definitely think it's worth experimenting with and, debate different formats. But unless you actually try it, it's difficult to know. For me, obviously being involved in lots of sports, the challenge system does work nicely as getting the balance between the speed of officiating and getting the key decisions right. And whether this is only there for the big errors is something that it's how it should be sold. I actually think it causes more problems selling it like that than not. But if you do have a challenge system, then all of the goals which are scored which aren't challenged, the fans can immediately celebrate. And I think that's one of the key concerns, is that all of these goals, you always have to wait. And so it kind of takes the atmosphere away. And if a side has run out of challenges, you can look at other sports that it still reduces the controversy of the instance. The Ben Stokes, when he won the Ashes, was stone dead LBW, but the Australians had already burnt all of their reviews. And still the umpire didn't get any negative press for having made the wrong decision, which, needless to say, he would have done without technology. So it still diffuses the situation and puts the destiny still in the players' hands. What's the right number of challenges for football? It's difficult. And I think that balance between the entertainment side of the game and the story of who has won the match is something that in the early days of Hawkeye and tennis, Wimbledon, which probably had a slightly different balance of that compromise between the other Grand Slams and other events. Wimbledon, you had more challenges than you did at the other events. So maybe a Champions League final, you have 3 incorrect challenges per match. The Premier League game, it's 1 or 2. But through experimenting with things like that, maybe you kind of get that balance right. Maybe you get an additional challenge if you've shown some good sportsmanship, or I don't know. There's things, or it could be another penalty. But
Paul, it needs to be kind of clearer as well. Otherwise, we're in the world of whole sort of like if there's 2 and it's clear, because the whole point with VAR is it just got so big. This nebulous idea of clear and obvious error. When we were thinking about it, we thought, it might be 1 or 2 tiny things a game, but they are everything. It's such a subjective point now that everything could be clear and obvious, and everything is under review. It just needs to be clean and clear, and it isn't.
One of the issues of that, though, with the actual laws of the game themselves, look at offside. It was introduced to stop goal hanging, never probably with the intention of, is someone's toe slightly offside in the build-up to a goal?
And yeah, personally, and this happened in cricket as well, it was sold initially as it's there to get rid of the grievous errors. Personally, I think that's just the wrong way. The VAR is not there for the grievous obvious errors. It will overside an offside decision if someone's a few millimeters offside. So that's not sort of like baked into the protocol of how it's used. I suppose it was there to sell it, but really what people are saying is we want to get rid of all of that controversy that happened when there was a big mistake. But the VAR rules is it's changing every single decision. Now, clearly the subjective ones of fouls and things like that, then what was given originally, kind of, is there enough evidence to overturn that decision? Rugby does that really well in terms of having made a decision. So there's a little bit of it in that side of things. But certainly for offsides, there is no clear and obvious. It's making a definitive decision. So personally, I think the right way to overcome that is just not sell it as trying to be there for that purpose. I think it's just be clear of what it's there to achieve.
You came up with I thought it was a fascinating idea around offsides, which was that it shouldn't be the limbs; it should just be the torsos that judge offsides, and also you should only be offside in the final third of the pitch.
It's if you come with what you want with any rule is getting the balance right between the entertainment of the game, maintaining the fabric of it, but part of it needs to be thinking about what's easy to officiate, and not just at the elite level where there's technology to assist, but at all levels of the game. And it's much easier for a linesman and for technology to see where the torso of a person is than the limbs, which are often cluttered more together and normally moving double the speed. A foot is moving double the speed of the body because one's moving whilst the other one's stationary. So if you're looking along the line as a linesman, it's much easier to see whether the torso of one person's is in front of the torso of another than it is his right foot. So if that still maintains the fabric of what offside is there to achieve, does that just make sense? Because then it's easier to officiate. But then, do you need offsides across the whole of the pitch? If the whole purpose of bringing it in was to stop goal hanging, well, if the ball was kicked from the final third, you're already not in a goal hanging kind of situation. Maybe actually that would just help create a little bit more space for attackers. Introduce a new way for teams to think about strategies in terms of settling up. Ice hockey does it incredibly well in terms of that kind of process. And so I just think it would be great to have some format of the game where you could experiment with those kind of things. So rather than debating it, not really knowing how it would change the fabric of the game, we actually had some hard evidence to go on.
It seems some of these rules of the game, they're just there to be microanalyzed, and it seems a whole problem with the way, particularly in football, things are set up, because I don't know, it takes away the enjoyment, doesn't it, Tariq, Martyn? If we're sort of having these forensic discussions over something like offside, we know they're not trying to cheat, really, are they? When slightly advanced, trying to score.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, we were having why did this stuff come in? Because everyone was having a go at the referees. Like, you made that mistake. Now we're having a go at the VARs. So the controversy has just moved from the field to the fellow in the computer room, and it's raging even more. People are more angry than they were before we brought all of this thing to stop people being angry for.
And I do think that I remember when we started tennis, we obviously got to know the line judges and the officials quite well. And for a line judge's perspective, they were taught, there was, say, 20% of their job was making the call and 80% of it was selling the call. So how they actually said out and with confidence and over was really key. And I do think the presentation of VAR doesn't help it because it causes two problems. That confidence of whether it's right, this sort of like period of silence in the ground when no one really knows what's going on doesn't help sell it. And if you bring people on the journey, and like other sports do in terms of allowing the audio between the referee and the VAR to be heard within the stadium, so you bring them on that journey. Firstly, I think their patience increases. So an acceptable amount of time for VAR to make a decision increases because they're part of that journey. But equally, I think the decision that ends up, you've kind of sold into it. It's not without some complications but I do think the benefit of getting to that point is worth the struggle of overcoming the challenges of getting there.
Paul, have you stopped celebrating immediately?
I think fans are just beginning to get a little bit more used to it now. So that emotional roller coaster, and football is a great game for the emotional ups and downs that it takes you on. And I suppose there's a little bit of, yes, you think you've scored a goal and then all of a sudden you haven't. So it's even more of a roller coaster to a certain extent. But that initial euphoria is definitely slightly lost, isn't it?
And we forget the flip side. It gives hope to those fans of teams that have just conceded, or if it was a fan of a player who's lost a point in tennis, for instance, you've got that glimmer of hope that you might just recover that moment.
I like the idea of having the audio played and the referee, a bit like rugby union. The referee says, "Is there any clear reason I can't award this goal?" And then the fans can hear that. I agree with you that, Paul.
Paul, you did a PhD in AI back in 1999. We see this as something new, but you were ahead of things back then. Is AI to replace all?
I don't think it's AI. Certainly within the sporting world, will hopefully always remain a tool, and I don't think we'll get to a point where it's sort of like is doing things that we more than what we want.
It's not going to replace all refs.
Let's hope not.
Obviously, you're not working day to day with Hawkeye anymore, and I think you've got quite an exciting project planned for later on this year.
Right, my whole world has been sport, both personal and professional, and I believe in the values that sport can teach. So, stupidly, I've agreed to row across the Atlantic with my son as part of the world's toughest row race. Although we'll just be happy to get to the other side. We'll learn both of us will learn a lot about resilience and mental toughness and all of the good things that any vehicle of sport can aim to teach. So it's an exciting challenge. We're spending plenty of time on the rowing machine, and we've got blisters and all the rest of it. So 50 days at sea for us in December.
You sold the company in 2011, just 13 years ago now. The use of technology and VAR and football, rugby, all these sports, was that the right time? Was that the right time to sell it, or I'm sure you've done quite well out of it, but it's mushroomed to such a level. Do you ever think maybe I should have hung on to it a bit longer?
Well, yeah, maybe I did stay involved for a number of those years after selling it, so it still wasn't completely out of it. But hindsight's a wonderful thing, and all the rest of it. Maybe it would have gone a different way, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's mushroomed a lot more after I wasn't running it, so maybe there's a lesson there too. But you don't get a second chance in life, so you just got to accept the decisions you made and get on with them. And it's not been so bad.
For life reviews to video replay.
It's been brilliant having you on, Paul. Fascinating, and all the best for your rowing exploits, which I think you're raising money for David Dean's charity.
You're raising money for David Dean's charity, the Twinning Project. Coming back to why we're doing it, of all the values in of that we've learnt through sport, and I think young offenders who are in prison probably haven't had the opportunity to learn those values, and giving them an insight into sport, whether that be through football or now rowing. We're going to create a rowing arm of the twinning projects to give them the same kind of opportunities to learn life values through sport is all what the charity is about. So when people come out of prison and reintegrate into society, they've got vehicles to learn about themselves, which is everyone involved in sports has often used those to better themselves. So it's giving them those opportunities, and I think it make a real difference to them.
Yeah, great initiative. And Paul, thanks for joining us on Sport Unlocked.
Thank you.
Perhaps we don't fully appreciate the role that Paul Hawkins has in the whole history of football.
No, I think he's probably one of the most influential people in terms of what football looks like now to compared to 30 years ago. And not just football, actually.
Did you get the sense, if you've seen Terminator, the movie, there was the fellow who, in the film, the man who designed it, he's like, just really angry with the machine he's created. There was a sense from Paul Hawkins that maybe his invention might not have gone down the way he wanted to go. Something about the scientist in Terminator about Paul. We'll have to get him on again to ask him if he sees that analogy.
Well, I'm sure he can't have predicted how much technology would be talked about. Remember that period when I was saying technology will take all the debating points out of football and other sports as well. But we say football, of course, because it is the number one sport. As Gianni will tell us, it does unite the world. Unites the world in anger as well at times, particularly over technology.
Yeah, very much so. I mean,
of course, VAR was actually Gianni's first IFAB meeting a week into his presidency back in 2016.
That's when he flew not on the private jet, but on EasyJet, and we all got reeled in.
Tariq, you're wearing orange at the moment.
On brand. But do you remember? Just remember those stories. They look quite embarrassing now, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's an entire future pod. We could just go back on which stories we might regret having written over the years.
It'll be a long pod.
Yeah. Send in your thoughts anyway to us. You can message us at Sport Unlocked on X, Facebook and Instagram. Your thoughts are very welcome, and as ever, if you hit subscribe, you land in your feeds automatically.
Goodbye.
Very good.
Thank you all for listening. Goodbye for now.